Welcome to the second part of this assessment briefing video. So this is for assessment 2 of the BSS027-2 operations and project management unit. So in the first part, we went through the assessment task and we looked at some good sources of information that you should be using. And in this second part, we're going to be looking at an ideal structure, both for question 1 and for question 2. So if we first look at the overall report structure, I have to stress this is a starting point. This is not a required structure. It's a suggestion. It's one that I would probably recommend, but if you choose to use a different structure, that's fine. You'll be marked on the basis of the mark scheme, just like everyone else. But this may be a good place to start when you're thinking about your structure. So this is not an executive, this is not a portfolio, like assessment 1. This is a formal business report. So you would have a title page like everything else. You've got 3 things you need to include on that title page at minimum. You need your student number. You need the unit code, which is BSS027-2, and you need the assessment number. So for this assessment, this is assessment 2. After the title page, you would want to have an executive summary, and the executive summary needs to do 2 things, really, at least in this kind of report. You need to explain what the purpose of the report is. And secondly, you need to give an indication of what the key findings are. So what you shouldn't do is simply say, in this report, I will be looking at A, B, and C, and I will make some recommendations. That's not useful. What you need to do is actually give an indication. So you need to highlight what your key findings actually are. So what is your reasoned recommendation in a sentence or 2, and what the key features of your project management plan are, again, in a sentence or 2. So your executive summary is not part of the word count, but it shouldn't have anything new in there anyway. Anything in the executive summary is just a summary. So it's summarizing what's actually in your main body of your report itself. But you're looking at about 2 paragraphs, 2 short paragraphs, or half a page, whichever is shorter maximum. So it's not a massively long page. It's just half a page at most, which is just allowing the reader to decide if they actually need to read your report or not. After that, you have your table of contents. Please make this using the built-in tools in Word, for example. It's very easy to do once you use proper headings and subheadings when you're formatting your report. Please do look into the guides on Study Hub and the library website if you need help with this. You need to produce a nice professional looking report. So a properly generated table of contents is an important part of that. Once you have that, the next step will be the actual main body. So this is where your actual word count begins. So section 1, again, I would suggest would be an introduction to the report. So that's an introduction to the entire report. You would do a couple of key things here. You would lay out what the premise and the purpose of the report are, so what the report is actually going to do and why it's being written. You would give any background or contextual information that's necessary for the rest of the report to make sense. So in this case, there may be other contextual information you may want to include, but I would suggest that at minimum, everyone needs to write at least a few sentences highlighting the major background of the report, which is the pandemic, which is, a necessary part of understanding the case study. And then lastly, you need to give an indication of how the rest of the report is going to be structured. So section 2.1, we're going to do this. Section 2.2 will do this. Section 2.3 will do this. So you need to give an overview of the rest of the report. Now, section 2 will be addressing question 1, and section 3 will be addressing question 2. And then section 4 is going to be your conclusion, followed by the reference list, and then by appendices. Now, I would strongly recommend using appendices for your project management plan. So if we expand this second section, so we expand section 2, I would recommend using something along the lines of this. So we can break section 2 into 5 subsections, and using the business report format, we would label them 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5. So the first subsection would be a statement of what your reasoned recommendation actually is. So you've analyzed the case study in assessment 1. You don't need to go back and reanalyze it. You simply want to have a short paragraph or two where you have a concise and focused explanation of what your recommendation is. So please don't put just to use Slack or to use Office 365. It needs to be put in the context of all of the varied issues in the LTR case study. So remember, you're providing a business solution to a business problem. You're not selling software. So you're not trying to sell Office 365. You're not trying to sell Slack. So you need to write in the context of providing a business solution to a business problem. So it can be a reasoned recommendation to revamp the communications, which part of that may involve using Slack or another product. It may be to rethink how data is handled internally. Part of that may involve an ERP software or other software. So you need to place it in those terms. This is bigger than just using one piece of software or another. Your project plan needs to reflect that as well. So it's a business solution to a business problem. Now, I've suggested here are actually to have high quality evidence backing your recommendation, and also to have reasoned recommendations rather than just stating what your recommendation is, to break down your recommendation into key elements. So I've suggested here to use 3, but you may use 2 or 4 or 5, whatever works to make a strong argument for your particular report. So you'd have a discussion of those key elements as well as strong evidence supporting them, and then you would finish with a short conclusion, which again highlights the key parts of your reasoned recommendation. So you're restating it like a mini conclusion within a broader report, and restating again your reasoned recommendation. So if we take a bit of a closer look at how this can be done internally, 2.1, which is your statement of what the recommendation is, you would clearly state the proposed solution is in entirety, again, not just the products being used, connecting those to some of the context of the case study. So if you're addressing some of the mental health problems, and that's a key concern for your proposed solution and your recommendation, make sure you say that. If you're addressing the collaboration issues primarily, make sure you say that as well. So you need to connect it to some of the issues that are being addressed. Now, when I mean discussion of your key element, so once you break down your recommendation into different elements, you want to explain what your key element actually is. Highlighting its likely effects, so positive effects, as well as its possible drawbacks, connecting and explaining how it's going to solve specific issues in the case study. So not just generic, or this will improve communication, or this will improve collaboration. How will it improve collaboration or communication? How will it solve those specific issues in the case study? So again, in order to have a strong evidence-based recommendation, it cannot be disconnected from the issues that you're trying to address. It has to be connected and linked to those issues. In terms of it being strongly evidenced and supported by high quality evidence, they're probably one of the biggest determinants of the mark for this section is going to be how well you actually back your argument with specific and quality research from the academic literature. So you need to really roll your sleeves up and get stuck in to discover. If you need to make an appointment with the academic liaison librarians, please do so. Is not something you can do in a couple of hours just before the deadline. You'll get a very poor mark, or even possibly fail the assessment. So if, let's say, your solution involves using ERP, to connect different data silos and to develop a central storage system for information and a knowledge management system for LTR. Your key element one may be storage and retrieval of data. That's a key part of any ERP solution. And you'll find lots of research studies in Discover which highlight research done in specific scenarios, specific instances, with particular conclusions, so particular findings. So your advocation, or you advocating this particular key element of this particular solution, you may explain what it is. You could highlight some likely effects and possible drawbacks. You connect it to specific issues in a case study, and each part of that would be connected to some sort of supporting literature. So you could find an academic research paper which looks, which is a record of a research study done. Let's say, for example, one of the ones in the seminar was a Canadian study which looked at, I think, 5 different Canadian SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, which LTR is, and looked at how the implementation of ERP systems generated certain benefits as well as certain disbenefits for their operation, for the functioning of their internal operation. So using that kind of study would give you strong supporting evidence for 2.2 if that is indeed what you're going for. If your focus is on communication, you'll find lots of academic research studies done on the impacts of different communication styles. You'll find lots of studies done on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns and the impacts on mental health, the impacts on operational functioning. So this is what you need to start doing. So we don't just use the academic literature to use them as textbooks. So we don't just use academic literature to kind of establish certain theories or to kind of cite particular academic concepts. We also use the literature in order to see what other academics have found in their real world research. So the topics under consideration for this case study and for this assessment are ones that have been studied quite, at significant length, particularly over the last 5 years or so, as data usage has become key. I mean, the common phrase that almost all companies are tech companies, they just haven't necessarily realized it yet in terms of the use and reliance on data for their internal operation. As well as the increasing importance of remote working and collaboration platforms and so on. So there has been a lot of research done on these areas. You need to dig into the academic literature, use those research studies to help form your argument and to support your points. And you would repeat that same pattern for 2.3 and 2.4 if you're using 3 key elements. So then what you're doing there is you're stating the proposed solution, you're breaking it down into 3 key bits, you're explaining each key bit independently, you're discussing it with this likely effects and possible drawbacks, you're connecting it to the case study, and you're backing all of your individual points with credible, high quality research from either the academic literature, or if you find some stuff from The Conversation or from Harvard Business Review, then you can mix in some of those citations as well. The goal is to have a strongly supported and well evidenced argument. And then you would end with a conclusion. So as we said before, a mini conclusion of your reasoned recommendations, where you restate the key arguments for your solution and you bring everything together, because the next step of the business report is going to be your project management plan. I probably should have discussed this while having the highlights on there, but yeah, we'll just skip through this and then we'll take a look at the second question. So as you said before, this is your general kind of high level overview of your structure, but we can expand section 3 now and look at it in more detail. So there is also going to be more, or I would recommend using appendices as well for this. So if we first just look at an expanded section 3, and this would have, I'd suggest, let's say, having 6 subsections for this part of your report. So number 1 would be a general overview of the project management plan. So you're introducing your project management plan, you're highlighting the different aspects of your plan, and you're giving any kind of high level discussion of the key points. So I would recommend as well to actually explain what a project management plan is. Bring in some strong citations from either from the literature, from the academic textbooks on project management, or indeed from the APM, the Association for Project Management. So you need to demonstrate your understanding of what a project management plan is, how it fits into the life cycle of a project, as well as some key features of your project management plan. Once you've done that, you can move on to the next subsection, so 3.2, an explanation and discussion of a work breakdown structure, or your work breakdown structure. Now, you don't need to include the actual work breakdown structure in the main body because it is supporting documentation. But you need to, if you have anything as an appendix, it needs to be cited or pointed to in the main body. So simply writing something along the lines of please see Appendix A for the work breakdown structure for the LTR project will be sufficient. But what you want to do for each of these elements, so for the work breakdown structure, for the time management plan, which is essentially your network diagram, for your critical path analysis, for the risk management plan, and for the project budget, is that you need to adopt this same basic pattern of explaining what these things are. So these are all bits of project management documentation. They all rely on some project management concept or model. So you need to explain what a work breakdown structure is. You need to have that supported by a credible citation, either academic citation from the textbooks or the literature, or from a credible quality non-academic citation. Again, the APM is a good place to start. And then you need to explain how it fits into the broader life cycle of a project. So what is the role of a work breakdown structure? How is it used within a project? Why is it important? What impact does it have on the planning process? And then finally, you need to highlight and discuss your work breakdown structure or your network diagram or your CPA. So that could be highlighting some key features. So for work breakdown structure, you could say, well, there's 6 different branches. It goes down to 7 different levels. So you can kind of pull out some key descriptions of the document itself or the documentation itself. You could also discuss how, the most important element. So for the risk log or the risk register, you could say, well, risk 3 is the most important risk that's been included in the risk register or the risk log, and this is important because of A, B, and C. So you need to discuss the actual document that you've included as well and highlight the most important or the key elements of that document. So if you go through all of the required documents, and in the lectures we have discussed, there's other elements that you could choose to include if you have space and you wish to. So things like a resource management plan, resource smoothing, and so on could be included as well. But they aren't required. So you have your minimum requirement that you have to do. And then if you want to attempt some others, that's fine. But those aren't required, for the actual, by the assessment brief itself. And then finally, you'd have your conclusion. So your conclusion would be the conclusion of the entire report. So you highlight, again, the key points, the key elements, and bring it together in a single concise summary. Then after your reference list, this is where you would actually include your appendices themselves. So the appendices are not connected to or not included in the word count. Your reference list isn't either. So the word count actually stops after the end of the conclusion. but they are for supporting documents, not for main body sections that you ran out of words for. So you can include a work breakdown structure, but you can't include an explanation and discussion of your work breakdown structure. The explanation and discussion belongs in the main body, but the work breakdown structure itself is considered to be part of it. It is a project management document as part of the project plan documentation, so that can be a supporting document in your appendices.